Hello. I'd like to talk about some movies that move me in some manner. There's no real order. Placement within the video is entirely arbitrary. Southland Tales was a movie I watched because of my affinity for the director Richard Kelly. I had seen Donnie Darko and, while trying to find out more about his oeuvre, I found that he had only directed 3 films. Southland Tales is a film that is truly... It is a Philip K. Dick inspired futuristic retelling of the Book of Revelation with elements of black comedy and satire. It also has a musical number. Even if this film warranted its critical backlash, it would still have value on its own for its truly unique tone. Now, I will admit, this film is pretentious, but it is earnestly so. On the first viewing, the only concrete positions I could gather from the film was that it was anti-surveillance, anti-fake news, and in support of the horseshoe theory. Again, one has to commend the film for the fact that one can see broadcasts from either side falsifying events we have seen from our objective standpoint as a viewer. This is all happening in sort of just running alongside the narrative, and it's very impressive. It's also interesting that our omniscient narrator is actually a character within the story that occasionally participates within it. On subsequent viewings, I stopped trying to tie a specific political standpoint to it and began enjoying it as a movie. It is incoherent in its ideas, but it is a wonderful chaos that carries you along with its enthusiasm. The Brown Bunny is amazingly effective for a film that is mostly composed of driving about. The sense of loneliness and alienation pervades the film. The protagonist is enigmatic and yet manages to establish sympathy despite us knowing nothing about him. The driving scenes are so beautiful and the film is just paced so perfectly. The dialogue is incredibly realistic and yet it also flows well. The film constantly provokes thought about what certain elements symbolize or why the protagonist is doing a particular action, and it always gives space to contemplate such things. One of the best films I think I've ever seen. Slow, minimalist, captivating. This film is just such a unique and beautiful experience. The Book of Henry is an incredibly emotionally resonant film, marred by a few transparently manipulative scenes and plot holes. It evokes the energy and optimism of childhood so well. It also realistically depicts the desperation for any connection towards a loved one that has passed away. The use of Christian symbolism is iffy, but I enjoyed that aspect as well. I don't have a whole lot to say about this film, as I've already talked about it, but I would like to know that all other Colin Trevorrow films look pretty subpar, they look pretty bland in comparison to the Book of Henry. But hey, as far as magnum opuses go, this ain't bad. Mr. Lonely is a film directed by one of my favorite auteurs working today, Harmony Korine. The film is composed of several character-driven vignettes rather than any structured plot, and that is ultimately its strength. The two plots running through the film seem unrelated, but I think they serve as a contrast to one another. The struggle to survive in Africa is juxtaposed with the more psychological, privileged struggles of the impersonators. The character of Michael is such a beautiful depiction of loneliness. Everyone in the island is lonely and isolated in one way or another, along with being literally isolated from the rest of the world. By joining this group of insular artists, Michael blocks himself off from the world and further retreats into his false identity. A lot of these films are about loneliness and alienation. Visually unique, amazing soundtrack, deep characters. Everything about this film is so perfectly constructed. The postmodern commentary on art and escapism as a whole is seamlessly woven into the story. While some postmodern works come across as annoyingly self-referential, End of Evangelion calmly and earnestly comments on how art can be used as a crutch to avoid making interpersonal connections, and how retreating into art is not only ineffective, but itself also causes pain. A miserable, yet beautiful and utterly necessary film. On a lighter note, here's the directorial debut of famous Hollywood screenwriter Max Landis.
Bruh.
It has the typical snarky, snappy Max Landis dialogue, but it manages to feel reasonably human. You could reasonably conceive of human beings having the conversations being featured in this film. There are some things attempted with editing that I have not seen before, such as the scene where Corey is repeatedly shown pressing the pedestrian crossing button, but every time he does so, there is a cut, and so his sense of ennui and dejection is conveyed. The journey in between the traffic lights might as well not exist to him. The surreal, brightly colored world in this film presents is also surprising, yet also inviting in a sense. As the surrealism is never horrific or harmful in any way, it is a very comfy, idealistic film. It's no masterpiece, but it deserved better than what it got. Freddy as FR07 is also on the idealistic end of the spectrum. Its plot is wonderfully sporadic, and it features such wonderful sights as Nazis and KKK members dancing to a musical number sang by an evil snake that used to be a queen in medieval France and is in a relationship with a terrorist overlord known as Il Supremo, played by Brian Blessed. The movie is based on stories director John Asevsky would tell his son. It shows. There's not a lot to say about this film other than Freddy slays, Nessie is cute, and Il Supremo is hammy. The soundtrack is also a bop. It warmed the cockles of my heart, but that's not exactly hard to do. Now for the moment you've all been waiting for. Dr. Pepper, Dark Berry. Is it good? It was an acquired taste. 7 out of 10.